Marcus smiled at his daughter's request, the expression softening the hard lines around his eyes. "We'll see, sweetheart. Let's get some real food in you first," he said, his voice carrying the gentle authority of a father who had learned to balance discipline with love through necessity rather than choice. Sarah Martinez approached their table with practiced efficiency, her worn sneakers silent on the checkered linoleum floor. She had been working at Miller's for 3 years, long enough to recognize the regulars and read the stories written in their faces. This man intrigued her. He came in every Tuesday and Thursday with his daughter, always ordered simple meals, always paid in exact cash, and always left a generous tip despite his obviously modest means. What caught her attention wasn't just his politeness or the way his daughter clearly adored him. It was something in his posture, the way he held himself with perfect alignment, even in casual conversation. His movements were economical, precise, like someone who had been trained to waste no motion. When he reached for his wallet, she noticed the faded tan line on his wrist where a watch had once been, and the way his eyes automatically swept the room before focusing on the menu. "Good evening, Mr. Chun," she said warmly. "The usual for Emma tonight? Chicken strips and apple juice?" Emma nodded enthusiastically while Marcus studied the menu with more attention than the simple offerings really required. "Actually, I think I'll try the ribeye steak tonight," Marcus said quietly, his finger tracing the menu item. "Medium rare, with the loaded potato." Emma's eyes widened with surprise. Her father rarely deviated from his usual grilled chicken or burger, meals that stretched their tight budget without breaking it completely. Sarah nodded, making a note on her pad. "It's a good choice. Chef does excellent steaks on Thursday nights." "And for Emma?" "The usual, please," Emma piped up, then looked at her father with curious eyes. "Daddy, why are you getting steak tonight? Is it a special day?" Marcus reached across the table and gently touched his daughter's hand. "Sometimes we deserve something nice, princess. You've been working so hard on your spelling tests." As Sarah walked toward the kitchen, she noticed Marcus pull out a crumpled envelope from his jacket pocket. His shoulders straightened as he opened it, and she caught a glimpse of official letterhead before he quickly folded it again. Whatever the letter contained, it had changed something in his demeanor. The usual quiet tension in his jaw had eased slightly, replaced by something that looked almost like relief. The restaurant continued its evening rhythm around them. Oldemers nursed coffee at the counter while families shared baskets of onion rings. The familiar sounds of clinking silverware and casual conversation created a backdrop of normalcy that Marcus seemed to absorb like medicine. Marcus Chun sat in the corner booth of Miller's family restaurant, his calloused hands wrapped around a coffee mug that had seen better days. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his weathered face, highlighting the small scar that ran from his left temple to his jawline. Across from him, his 7-year-old daughter, Emma, colored quietly in her activity book, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. The dinner rush was beginning to pick up around them, families filling the red vinyl booths and chattering over plates of comfort food. Marcus watched the room with the subtle awareness of someone who had learned long ago that relaxation was a luxury he couldn't afford. His dark eyes moved methodically from the kitchen door to the front entrance, cataloging exits and potential threats in a way that had become as natural as breathing. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've seen similar quiet moments between parents and children in restaurants where you're from. Emma looked up from her coloring book, her small face brightening with excitement. "Daddy, can we get the chocolate cake after dinner?" she asked, her voice carrying the hopeful note of a child who had learned not to ask for too much but couldn't help trying anyway. The dinner rush was in full swing when 3 men in expensive suits entered Miller's, their voices carrying across the restaurant with the entitled loudness of people accustomed to commanding attention. They slid into a booth near the center of the dining room, immediately snapping their fingers at Sarah as she passed with another table's order. "Hey, sweetheart, bring us 3 whiskeys neat and make it snappy," the largest of them called out, his voice cutting through the family-friendly atmosphere like a blade. "We're important people with places to be." Sarah's professional smile tightened, but she nodded politely. "I'll be right with you, gentlemen. Let me just deliver this order first." The man's face reddened. "Did I stutter?" I said, "Now, what kind of establishment is this where the help doesn't understand simple English?" From his corner booth, Marcus's attention shifted subtly from Emma's animated description of her art class to the unfolding scene. His hand moved instinctively to rest on the table, fingers positioned in a way that would allow quick movement if necessary. Emma continued chattering, oblivious to the tension, but Marcus's focus had sharpened with the practiced awareness of someone trained to assess threats. The businessman continued his verbal assault on Sarah, his voice growing louder and more aggressive. Other diners began to shift uncomfortably, parents quietly shushing children and glancing toward the exit. Sarah approached the businessmen's table with their whiskeys, her hands steady despite the obvious stress. "I apologize for the wait, gentlemen. Here are your drinks." The largest man grabbed her wrist as she set down his glass, his grip tight enough to make her wince. "Listen here, princess. In the real world, when important people give you an order, you jump. Maybe they don't teach that in whatever trailer park you crawled out of, but that's how civilized society works." "Let go of me, please," Sarah said firmly, trying to pull her arm free. The man's grip tightened, and his companions laughed, as if witnessing her discomfort was the evening's entertainment. "What's the magic word, sweetheart? Maybe if you ask real nice, I'll consider it," he sneered, his alcohol-tainted breath washing over her face. Marcus felt his daughter's small hand slip into his as Emma sensed the change in atmosphere, though she couldn't quite understand what was happening. "Daddy, why is that man being mean to the nice lady?" she whispered. "Stay right here, princess," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying a subtle edge that hadn't been there moments before. "Don't move from this seat, okay?" The businessman's voice grew louder, drawing stares from every table in the restaurant. "Maybe we should teach this little waitress some manners, boys. Show her how real men expect to be treated." Marcus rose from his seat with fluid precision, his movements so smooth and controlled that it barely disturbed the coffee cup on his table. The change in his demeanor was subtle but unmistakable, like a switch had been flipped inside him. His shoulders squared, his spine straightened, and suddenly the mild-mannered construction worker had transformed into something far more formidable. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying across the restaurant with quiet authority. "I think the lady asked you to let her go." The businessman looked up with drunken arrogance, still gripping Sarah's wrist. "And who exactly are you supposed to be, construction boy? This doesn't concern you, so why don't you sit back down before you get hurt?" Marcus took 3 measured steps forward, each movement calculated and purposeful. Emma watched from the booth with wide eyes, sensing that her father had become someone different, someone she had never seen before, but somehow recognized in the way he carried himself. "Sir, I'm going to ask you once more to release the lady," Marcus said calmly. His hands remained at his sides, relaxed but ready, and there was something in his tone that made conversations throughout the restaurant fall silent. The second businessman started to stand, but Marcus's gaze flicked to him with such intensity that the man hesitated halfway up, suddenly uncertain about his next move. The lead businessman's face twisted with rage at being challenged. He released Sarah's wrist and lurched to his feet, his bulk towering over most of the restaurant patrons. "You want to play hero, tough guy? Let me show you what happens to construction workers who don't know their place." He swung a wild haymaker toward Marcus's face, the kind of sloppy punch that worked in barrooms against untrained opponents. But Marcus wasn't untrained. He moved with lightning precision, stepping inside the arc of the punch while simultaneously deflecting the man's arm with his left hand. In one fluid motion, he grabbed the businessman's wrist, applied pressure to a specific nerve point, and guided him face first into the table with such controlled force that the whiskey glasses barely rattled. The second man tried to rush Marcus from behind, but found himself on the floor in less than 2 seconds, his arm twisted behind his back in a position that made any movement excruciating. The third businessman remained frozen in his seat, suddenly very interested in studying his drink. Everyone in Miller's family restaurant stared in stunned silence. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 10 seconds, and Marcus had handled 3 aggressive men without breaking a sweat or raising his voice. Sarah stood pressed against the wall, her eyes wide with shock and something that looked remarkably like recognition. Marcus maintained his position for exactly 3 seconds, ensuring both men understood their situation, then released them with the same controlled precision he had used to subdue them. He stepped back calmly, his breathing unchanged, his expression returning to the mild demeanor he had worn moments before. "I suggest you gentlemen settle your bill and find somewhere else to finish your evening," he said quietly. "The police response time in this neighborhood is approximately 4 minutes, and I don't think any of us wants that kind of paperwork." The lead businessman struggled to his feet, his expensive suit wrinkled and his dignity thoroughly shattered. His face was red with humiliation as he threw 2 20s on the table and gestured for his companions to follow him toward the exit. "You haven't heard the last of this," he muttered, but the threat carried no weight after what everyone had witnessed. Marcus waited until they were completely gone before turning to Sarah, his expression immediately softening with genuine concern. "Are you hurt? Did he injure your wrist?" Sarah shook her head slowly, still processing what she had seen. "I'm fine, but how did you do that? That was incredible." Before Marcus could answer, Emma's small voice called from their booth. "Daddy, you were like a superhero." The pride in her voice was unmistakable, and Marcus's entire demeanor shifted back to that of a devoted father. Marcus walked back to Emma with the same steady gait he had maintained throughout the confrontation, sliding into the booth as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "Just helping someone who needed it, sweetheart. That's what we do when people are in trouble, right?" Emma nodded solemnly, her 7-year-old mind processing the lesson her father had just demonstrated in the most powerful way possible. "Are you really a superhero, Daddy?" "Just a regular dad who loves you very much," Marcus replied, smoothing her hair with gentle fingers that had just executed combat techniques with lethal precision. Sarah approached their table slowly, carrying Marcus's steak dinner on a tray. The restaurant had gradually returned to its normal hum of conversation, but she could feel curious glances directed toward their corner booth. She set the plate down carefully, her mind racing with questions and growing certainty about what she had witnessed. "Mr. Chun," she began quietly, then paused. "The way you moved, the control, the training, that wasn't something you learned in construction work, was it?" Marcus cut a piece of his steak with methodical precision, his eyes not meeting hers. "Sometimes life teaches us skills we never expected to need," he said diplomatically. Sarah nodded slowly, understanding that he wasn't ready to share his story. But as she walked toward the kitchen, her mind was already forming the words she needed to write. Sarah retreated to the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly as she pulled a piece of paper from her order pad. The words came to her with surprising clarity, as if they had been waiting inside her heart for exactly this moment. She wrote quickly, pausing only to wipe away tears that she hadn't realized were falling. Meanwhile, Marcus and Emma finished their dinner in comfortable companionship. Emma chattered about her upcoming school play, while Marcus listened with the focused attention he gave to everything his daughter shared. The normalcy of their conversation stood in stark contrast to the extraordinary events that had just unfolded. Other diners continued to steal glances at their table, whispering among themselves about what they had witnessed. An elderly man at the counter raised his coffee cup in a subtle salute when Marcus looked his way, and a young mother mouthed the words "thank you" from across the room. When Sarah returned with their check, she also carried a folded piece of paper. Her hands were steady now, but her eyes held a depth of emotion that hadn't been there an hour ago. She placed both items on the table with careful reverence. "The check is taken care of," she said quietly, "and this is for you." Marcus reached for the folded paper with curiosity, but as his eyes began to scan the handwritten words, his entire body went completely still. The fork in his other hand trembled and clattered to the plate. The note contained only a few lines, but they struck Marcus with the force of a revelation. In Sarah's careful handwriting, the words read, "Thank you for your service, both to our country and to our community tonight. I recognize the bearing of someone who has sacrificed more than most people will ever know. Your daughter is lucky to have a hero for a father, even if the world doesn't always see it. This meal is a small token of the gratitude you deserve every day. Marcus's throat tightened as he read the words again. In all the months since his medical discharge, since he had traded his Navy SEAL trident for construction tools and food service jobs, no one had seen past the humble exterior to recognize what he had been, what he still carried inside him. Emma noticed the change in her father's expression immediately. "Daddy, are you sad? What did the nice lady write?" Marcus folded the note carefully, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "She wrote something very kind, Princess. Something that reminds Daddy that good people still exist in the world." Sarah watched from a distance, understanding instinctively that she should give them privacy for this moment. Around the restaurant, other patrons continued their meals, but the atmosphere had shifted. There was a warmth in the air that hadn't been there before, a sense that something meaningful had just occurred in their small corner of the world. As Marcus and Emma prepared to leave, Sarah approached their table one final time. She handed him a business card with a local veterans organization logo. "My brother runs this group. They help with job placement and support services. He's been looking for someone with your background to help with their security consulting business." Marcus studied the card, his calloused fingers tracing the embossed lettering. The weight of possibility settled over him like sunlight after a long storm. "Thank you," he said simply, but those two words carried depths of gratitude that filled the space between them. Emma tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, can we come back next week? I want to see Sarah again." Sarah knelt down to Emma's level, her smile genuine and warm. "I'll be here, sweetheart, and I'll make sure to save your favorite booth." As they walked toward the exit, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months: hope. The other diners watched them go with respect and quiet admiration, understanding they had witnessed something special. Outside in the parking lot, Emma looked up at her father with shining eyes. "Daddy, you really are a superhero, aren't you?" Marcus lifted his daughter into his arms, holding her close against his chest. "I'm just a dad who loves you, Emma. But sometimes that's superhero enough." If this story touched your heart, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, or if you've ever witnessed hidden heroes in your own community.